Welcome to Big Daddy Storytime. We're reading Walt Disney's Lilo and Stitch. Hey, can you see Stitch there? You can see him. Great job. Can you see Lilo there? They're dancing together. Can you see that? Oh, you're doing so good. Would you like to read a story about Lilo and Stitch? You would? Okay, let's get started. In a far off galaxy, an alien scientist named Jumba had created a strange creature called Experiment 629. Because 629 was always destroying things, he was being sent to prison by the guard councilwoman. But 629 managed to escape. Now 629 headed for Earth. The Grand Councilwoman sent Jumba and Pleakley, another alien, on a mission to capture 629 and bring him back. Meanwhile, on Earth, a 5-year-old Hawaiian girl named Lilo was also on a mission. She was feeding a peanut butter sandwich to a fish named Pludge. Lilo thought it was very important to do this because she believed Pludge controlled the weather. Unfortunately, Lilo was now late for her hula dance lesson. Lilo rushed to her dance class, dropping water on the floor. Her classmates began to slip and slide. Stop, stop, cried the hula instructor. He asked Lilo why she was late and wet. The little girl tried to explain about Pludge. You're crazy, said Myrtle, one of Lilo's classmates. Lilo pounced on Myrtle. The instructor quickly pulled them apart. The instructor called Lilo's sister Nani to take Lilo home. Nani was Lilo's only family. But when Nani arrived, Lilo had already left. Nani panicked because a social worker was arriving this afternoon to decide whether Lilo could continue to live with Nani. But Lilo was already at home, listening to Elvis Presley music. She was sad because none of her classmates wanted to be her friend. Lilo was so upset she locked her sister out of the house. Nani was still trying to get in when the social worker, Cobra Bubbles, arrived. Once inside, the visit went from bad to worse. Cobra had told Nani that she had 3 days to prove that she could take care of Lilo properly. Otherwise, Lilo would be taken away. Later that evening, Nani and Lilo were walking out talking in Lilo's room. Suddenly, something lit up the sky outside. A falling star, Lilo shouted excitedly. She pushed Nani out of her room. Lilo wanted to make a wish in private, but Nani still listened to Lilo's whispered. It's me again. I need someone to be my friend. Maybe send me an angel, the nicest angel you have. But what Lilo had really seen was 626's spaceship crashing into Earth. 626 stepped out of the smoking crater. He crackled with delight. Ah! He headed down a dark road only to be run over by some trucks and knocked out. When he woke up the next morning, none the worse for wear, the indestructible 629 found he was in an animal rescue home. Before long, he realized that Jumba and Pleakley were after him. That same morning, Nani and Lilo went to the animal rescue home to find a pet. Nani hoped it would cheer Lilo up. When Lilo came in, 629 tried to look as much like a dog as he could. Lilo was his only way to escape from Jumba and Pleakley, so he hugged Lilo and won her heart. What is that thing? Nanny cried when she saw 626. A dog, I think, the rescue lady answered nervously. Despite Nanny's protest, Lilo adopted her new dog and named him Stitch. Meanwhile, Jumba and Figby were watching as Nanny and Lilo left with Stitch. Jamba wanted to capture 629 right away, but Pleakley reminded his partner that they could not be seen. We have to blend in, Pleakley told him. After Nanny left for work, Lilo tried to teach Stitch to fetch, but Stitch was not interested in being trained. Lilo ended up fetching for Stitch instead. Then Lilo brought 2 snow cones. Stitch ended up dumping his on the head of a small dog. Stitch was not exactly what Lilo had expected. Dressed like tourists, Jumba and Pleakley were nearby watching Stitch. They were watching for their chance to capture him. Later that day, Lilo and Stitch sat in the restaurant where Nanny worked. Lilo finished drawing in her sketchbook and held it up to Stitch. "This is you," she told him. "This is your badness level. It's unusually high for someone your size. We need to fix that, though." Jumba and Pleakley were also sitting in the restaurant. They lured Stitch over to their table. While Jumba grabbed Stitch and tried to place his alien handcuffs on the creature, Stitch opened his mouth wide and swallowed Pleakley's head. Nanny had to dump a pitcher of iced tea on Stitch to make him let go. When the restaurant owner found out that Stitch belonged to Nanny, he pointed to the door. "This is not working out," he told Nanny. Nanny and Lilo took Stitch home. "This is a great home. You'll like it a lot," Lilo told Stitch. She gave him a pillow so he could sleep on the floor. Stitch shredded the pillow. Then he went to the kitchen where he made another mess. Nanny had had enough of this. She grabbed Stitch saying, "We have got to take him back. He he was an orphan and we adopted him," said Lilo. "What about Ona?" Nanny stopped. Their father had taught them about Ona. Ona means family. Lilo continued, "Family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten." I know," Nanny said, sighing. Stitch jumped from Nanny's arms, and he and Lilo went into Lilo's room. Stitch climbed onto Lilo's bed and found a photograph of her family under the pillow. "Be careful with that," Lilo warned. The picture was all she had left of her father and mother. She snatched it back and slipped the precious photo back underneath her pillow. So Stitch amused himself with other things in Lilo's room. He built a model city and then destroyed it. In the middle of the night, Stitch woke Lilo and showed her a picture in a book he had found. "That's the ugly duckling," Lilo yawned. "See? He's sad because he's all alone and nobody wants him." Lilo pointed to another page. "And on this page, his family hears him crying and they find him. He is happy because he knows where he belongs." Stitch took the book and crawled into the bed Lilo had made for him. Next morning, Cobra Bubbles found them a visit. "Here, you lost your job," he said to Nanny. But before Nanny could explain, Stitch whacked Cobra with a book. As he left, Cobra told Nanny that she had got to get a new job if she expected to keep Lilo. To Lilo, he said, "And next time I see this dog, I expect it to be a model citizen." So Nanny set out to find a new job with Lilo and Stitch in tow. First, he went to a local grocery store. First, she went to a local grocery store while Nanny spoke to the owner. Lilo tried to teach Stitch to behave. "Elvis Presley was a model citizen," Lilo explained. "I've compiled a list of his traits for you to practice. Number one, he is dancing." Unfortunately, their dance routine knocked over the owner, so Nanny didn't get the job. While Nanny tried to get a job at the coffee shop, Lilo continued with Stitch's lessons. "Number two, Elvis played guitar," she said as she handed Stitch a ukulele. But when Stitch played the instrument, the piercing high notes shattered the glass. Nanny didn't get that job either. Finally, as Nanny tried to get a job as a lifeguard, Lilo prepared Stitch for his last lesson. "Time to bring it all together," she told him. Stitch began to play his ukulele. Tourists began to crowd around him to take pictures, but their camera flashes upset Stitch, who caused a commotion. Nanny once again did not get the job. Everything had gone wrong. The unhappy sisters sat down on the bench. David, a friend of Nanny's, saw them. To cheer them up, David suggested they all go surfing. The group headed for the waves. Once she began to surf, Nanny forgot all her troubles. Stitch clapped his paws, and David and Lilo laughed as they enjoyed the waves. For a little while, everyone was happy. But as Nanny, Lilo, and Stitch rode a large wave, Jumba sneaked up behind them. Jumba grabbed Stitch and pulled him under the water. Desperate, Stitch grabbed Lilo and began dragging her down. David and Nani pulled Lilo to safety, never noticing the aliens. Stitch finally won his struggle with Pleakley and Jumba, but he was exhausted. Luckily, David went back and rescued Stitch. Back on the beach, Nani frantically checked to make sure Lilo was okay. Nani looked up to see Cobra Bubbles watching. He had seen the whole thing. Nani asked David to watch Lilo. Then Cobra quietly told Nani that although he knew she was trying, it was time to find a more suitable home for Lilo. That night, Lilo studied her family photo. Our family's little now, but if you want, you could be part of it, she said to Stitch. Stitch wanted to belong, but he knew he had already caused too much trouble. While Lilo watched, Stitch took the Ugly Duckling book and climbed out of the window into the night. Stitch walked into the forest. He opened the storybook to the pages that Lilo had showed him. Just like the Ugly Duckling, Stitch felt alone. I'm lost, he cried. The next morning, a very unhappy Grand Councilwoman fired Pleakley and Jumba, but Jumba was pleased. Now he could capture Stitch his way. Soon Jumba found Stitch in the forest. Soon Stitch didn't run, but he wouldn't go with Jumba either. Waiting, Stitch told Jumba. For what? Jumba asked impatiently. Finally, replied Stitch. Family, family. You're built to destroy. You can never belong, Jumba said. Stitch dropped the book and ran. Meanwhile, Lilo joined Nani in the kitchen for breakfast. Stitch left, Lilo murmured sadly. Nani comforted Lilo, but it would be harder to tell Lilo that they would be living apart. But suddenly David burst in saying, I think I've found you a job. This was Nani's last chance to keep Lilo. She rushed out with David, telling Lilo to stay inside and not to let anyone in. At the same time, Stitch was racing to Lilo's house with Jumba following close behind. Stitch slipped through the dog door. Jumba crashed through the front door. Frightened, Lilo called Cobra Bubbles. Aliens are attacking my house. They want my dog. Jumba and Stitch fought so hard that they destroyed the house. Meanwhile, Nani got the job at the general store down the street. As she left, a fire engine shrieked past. Fearing the worst, Nani raced home. Cobra Bubbles was already there. Lilo was in his car. Nani begged Cobra not to take Lilo from her. Cobra just pointed to the ruined house and shook his head. Lilo watched as the two argued. Then she slipped out of the car and into the forest. Stitch followed her. Stitch quickly found Lilo and wanted to apologize. He handed Lilo her scorched family photo, which he had managed to save. But Lilo was angry at Stitch. You ruined everything, she shouted. Lost for words, Stitch transformed himself into his alien form. Lilo finally understood. You're one of them? At that moment, an alien named Captain Gandu appeared. He had been sent by the Grand Councilman to capture Stitch. He snared. Both Stitch and Lilo had carried them to his spaceship. Stitch escaped, but before he could free Lilo, Gandu's ship took off. By the time Nani's arrived, she was too late. She watched as the spaceship carried her sister disappeared into the sky. Luckily, Stitch convinced Jumba and Pleakley to help him rescue Lilo. Soon, Nani and the three aliens were in Jumba's spaceship, battling Captain Gandu. After a wild chase, Stitch was able to free Lilo. Jumba landed his spaceship on the waves behind David, who was surfing. David gave them all a ride to shore on his surfboard, though it took a few trips. But their troubles were not over. Cobra Bubbles was waiting on the beach for Lilo, and alien troops were waiting for Stitch. The Grand Councilman ordered the troops to place Stitch on her ship. Stitch asked if he could say goodbye to Lilo. The councilwoman was shocked. This is my family, Stitch explained. I found it all my own. It's little and broken, but it's good. Then Lilo showed Stitch's adoption papers to the Grand Councilwoman. A stickler for rules, she agreed to let Stitch stay on Earth with Lilo, and Cobra decided Lilo could stay with Nani. Jumba and Pleakley stayed on Earth too. Along with David and Cobra Bubbles, they became part of Lilo's new family, where no one ever gets left behind. What have we learned today, my friends? We learned from Stitch, Lilo, Nani, Pleakley, and Jumba that we show kindness by showing our love for others. Have a great day, my friends. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more Big Daddy Story Time. God bless.